Millions live and work in the heart of Metro Manila, never realizing that beneath the crowded streets, the ground is shifting, quite literally, at 2 centimeters a year. Scientists warn it's not a matter of if, but when. The West Valley Fault is primed for a magnitude 7.2 earthquake, a disaster with the power to cripple an entire megacity. Yet, after centuries of quiescence, most have forgotten, or never knew, just how close this time bomb is to exploding. What drives this silent force? And why do experts believe the countdown could end in our lifetime? The ground beneath Metro Manila isn't just moving, it's grinding. The West Valley Fault System is a textbook example of a strike-slip fault, where 2 massive slabs of the Earth's crust slide horizontally past each other. This isn't a gentle drift. Each year, the fault edges shift about 2 centimeters, roughly the width of a fingernail. Yet, over centuries, that small movement adds up to meters of pent-up strain. During an earthquake, this pressure is released in seconds, sending shockwaves through everything built above. The Valley Fault System is split into 2 main segments. The West Valley Fault, stretching more than 100 kilometers, cuts directly through Quezon City, Marikina, Pasig, Taguig, and Muntinlupa. To the east, a shorter segment, the East Valley Fault, runs through parts of Rizal province. Both are right lateral faults, which means that if you stand on one side and look across, the other side would jerk to your right when the fault slips. This sideways tearing motion is especially dangerous in a city packed with bridges, roads, and high-rise buildings that were never meant to be pulled in opposite directions. Strike-slip faults behave differently from the faults that push up mountains or pull open valleys. Here, the danger lies in the sudden horizontal lurch. Imagine 2 conveyor belts moving in opposite directions with buildings, pipelines, and power lines caught in between. When the fault finally slips, the ground on each side can move several meters in a matter of seconds. Anything straddling the fault, houses, schools, even entire neighborhoods, can be torn apart along a line invisible until the moment it moves. The West Valley Fault's path is not a straight line. In southeastern Metro Manila, the fault splits into overlapping segments, forming what geologists call a dilational jog. This 15-kilometer stretch is laced with smaller faults arranged like the misaligned teeth of a zipper. These geometric quirks can focus stress and make certain areas even more prone to strong shaking or ground rupture. In some places, slow, almost imperceptible movement, known as aseismic creep, has been detected, shifting the ground without earthquakes. But this doesn't mean safety. Instead, it hints at complex behavior that can make future quakes harder to predict. The relentless, quiet grinding of the Valley Fault System is what makes it so dangerous. Every year that passes, another 2 centimeters of stress is loaded into the rocks. Over 4 centuries. That's 8 meters. About the height of a 2-story house, waiting to break free. When the fault finally slips, the ground won't just shake, it will shear, tearing across the landscape in a horizontal jolt that can split roads, topple buildings, and reshape neighborhoods in an instant. This is the hidden engine behind the warnings. The West and East Valley faults are not just lines on a map. They are active boundaries, storing energy day by day, year by year. The science is clear. This slow-motion collision is building toward a sudden release. What happens above ground depends on how much strain the city can absorb when the fault decides to move. The West Valley Fault is not just a line of weakness, it's a loaded spring. Every year, 2 centimeters of movement slip by unnoticed. Over centuries, that becomes 8 meters of strain, locked in silence beneath Metro Manila. The last time this energy broke free was in 1658. Historical accounts describe a violent rupture, but the details have faded with time. What scientists know is this: the fault's major earthquakes tend to repeat every 400 to 600 years. That window is not a guess. It's a pattern, revealed by digging trenches across the fault and studying layers of disturbed soil. Each layer marks a past earthquake, like rings inside a tree, and the gaps between them set the clock for the next event. The clock now points to a statistical milestone. If the last big rupture was in 1658, the 400-year mark lands in 2058. That doesn't mean the quake will strike on schedule, but it does mean the probability rises with every passing decade. Earthquake science can't provide a countdown, only a window of risk that grows wider as strain accumulates. Right now, the fault holds enough pent-up energy to move the ground sideways by as much as 8 meters in an instant. That's the height of a city bus, unleashed in seconds. The baseline scenario for the next rupture is a magnitude 7.2 earthquake. This number isn't plucked from the air. It's calculated from the fault's length, the measured slip rate, and the historical record. A quake of this size would release energy equivalent to hundreds of nuclear bombs detonating underground. The shaking could last up to a minute, long enough to bring down buildings, snap bridges, and topple power lines across the city. The force would be greatest along the fault trace, but the shockwaves would radiate outward, shaking districts far from the epicenter. Scientists use the 2058 milestone as a warning, not a prophecy. The actual rupture could come sooner or much later, but the odds shift as the interval lengthens. With each year, the city's exposure grows. More people, more buildings, more critical infrastructure. Each new layer of urban life is built on ground that is, by geologic standards, overdue for a reset. The Valley Fault System doesn't keep a strict schedule, but it does keep score. The longer the silence, the greater the risk when it finally breaks. This is why the big one is not a hypothetical threat. It is a statistical certainty, waiting somewhere within a window that is already opening. The science draws a line through history and into the future, placing Metro Manila's fate on a timeline measured in centuries, not lifetimes. The question is not whether the fault will move again, but how much the city will change before it does. Metro Manila holds more than 13 million people in a patchwork of neighborhoods, high-rises and shantytowns, all layered over the restless ground. The city's density is among the highest in the world, over 20,000 people per square kilometre in some districts. In places like Barangay Tumana in Marikina, families live just meters from the fault itself. Tumana's narrow lanes are lined with houses built from hollow blocks, plywood and salvaged tin. Many residents settled here decades ago, drawn by jobs in the city and the promise of a place to call their own, even if the ground beneath them is unstable. Children run to school each morning past concrete walls painted with reminders to duck, cover and hold. But most homes in Tumana and in thousands of similar communities were built without engineers or blueprints. These informal settlements are especially vulnerable. When the ground shakes, unreinforced walls can crumble in seconds. Fivo Elkes estimates that across Metro Manila, 170,000 residential buildings could suffer heavy damage or collapse in a magnitude 7.2 earthquake. That number includes both informal homes and older formal structures built before earthquake-resistant codes were enforced. The risk isn't limited to the poorest neighborhoods. High-rise condominiums now crowd the skylines of Makati, Bonifacio Global City and Ortigas. Newer towers follow stricter standards, but many mid-rise and high-rise buildings were constructed under older codes or with minimal retrofitting. In the rush to build upward, entire blocks have filled with thousands of residents stacked dozens of floors above ground. In a major quake, elevators will stall, stairwells may crack, and rescue could take days. Commercial centres face their own dangers. More than 34,000 shops, offices and warehouses are at risk of severe damage or collapse. Many of these site along major roads or near riverbanks where the soil is soft, an added hazard when shaking starts. The concentration of people inside malls, schools and office towers multiplies the danger. At lunchtime on a weekday, a single collapsed building could trap hundreds inside. For residents of Tumana, the threat is never far from mind. Mang Tony, a tricycle driver, keeps a plastic whistle tied to his keys. He's lived on the same street for 25 years, raising his children in a house he built himself, one cement bag at a time. He knows the warnings, but moving isn't an option. His work, his family, and his memories are rooted here. Like millions across Metro Manila, he faces a daily calculation. The risk beneath his feet versus the reality of life in the city. Each new apartment block, every informal dwelling adds another layer of vulnerability. The numbers are stark. 170,000 homes, 34,000 businesses, and millions of lives at risk. When the ground moves, what stands and what falls depends on decisions made years ago. Where to build, how to build, and whether the danger was ignored or faced head-on. The people of Metro Manila live with that uncertainty every day, waiting for the moment when the fault will finally remind the city who is really in control. Critical infrastructure in Metro Manila sits directly in harm's way. Dozens of hospitals, fire stations, and emergency operations centers line the West Valley Fault, some less than 100 meters from the mapped rupture zone. Hospital ng Makati, Quirino Memorial Medical Center, and major clinics in Pasig and Taguig are among the facilities that would face immediate danger. Many of these buildings were constructed before modern seismic codes, and while some have received partial retrofitting, most were never designed to withstand a magnitude 7.2 earthquake. Even facilities with upgraded structures depend on lifelines, water, power, fuel, and access roads that cross the fault repeatedly. When the ground shears, water mains snap. The pipes that supply millions can break at every crossing, draining reservoirs and leaving hospitals and neighborhoods without water for days. Many hospitals store only enough water for 24 to 48 hours. Diesel generators can keep the lights on for a day or two, but fuel deliveries rely on roads and bridges that may be impassable. The World Bank estimates that more than 5,000 road segments cross the fault, and up to 34% of Metro Manila's road network could be crippled by liquefaction, where the ground turns to liquid, swallowing vehicles and buckling pavement. In a magnitude 7.2 quake, average ambulance access times to hospitals could jump by 148%, with over 1 million people facing delays of more than an hour. For critical trauma cases, those minutes mean the difference between life and death. The Marikina Valley is especially vulnerable. Its soft, water-saturated soils make it a hotspot for liquefaction. During strong shaking, the ground can suddenly lose all strength, causing buildings to tip or collapse, even if their walls remain unbroken. Underground pipes, cables, and foundations shift and break as the soil flows. The phenomenon is unpredictable. One street might remain stable while the next sinks a meter overnight. This patchwork of ground failure can cut neighborhoods off from rescue and relief for days. Fire is the silent threat that follows. Gas lines rupture, electrical shorts, spark flames, and water for firefighting is gone. In the dense maze of Manila's neighborhoods, a single fire can leap from house to house, unchecked by blocked roads and dry hydrants. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake offers a warning. More than 80% of the city burned after the shaking stopped, with most deaths caused by fire. Metro Manila's mix of wood, concrete, and informal structures packed close together could see similar devastation. Emergency vehicles may never reach the worst-hit areas, trapped by debris and failed infrastructure. The collapse of these lifelines is not just a technical problem, it is a chain reaction. Hospitals unable to operate, fire stations cut off, water and power gone, and roads blocked, mean that the very systems meant to save lives become victims themselves. The big one would not be a single disaster, but a cascade of failures, each compounding the last. The city's resilience will depend on how well these links hold when the fault finally moves. FIVOLCS runs a network of seismic stations across Metro Manila, with 15 digital sensors tracking the valley fault system around the clock. Their headquarters in Quezon City receives real-time data, alerting disaster officials within seconds of any tremor. But even with this coverage, some neighborhoods, especially on the city's edges, fall into monitoring blind spots. Telemetry outages, whether from brownouts or technical failures, can leave parts of the metropolis less protected, and micro-zoning remains limited in sprawling informal settlements. Efforts to strengthen the city's buildings have struggled to keep up with the scale of risk. Out of more than 200,000 structures flagged as high risk, fewer than 12% of critical public buildings have been retrofitted. That includes just 22 major hospitals in the capital region and a fraction of the city's public schools. Private high-rises built before the 1990s face even steeper odds, with less than 8% upgraded for earthquakes. The government's total spending on retrofitting since 2018 amounts to only a tenth of what engineers say is needed. Funding gaps, legal disputes, and the reluctance of property owners slow progress, leaving most of Metro Manila's built environment exposed. On the front lines, 19 search and rescue teams stand ready in Metro Manila, each with a corps of trained responders and a handful of K9 units. In drills, these teams can deploy within 45 minutes of a major quake. But simulations reveal a hard truth. After the first day, fatigue sets in and equipment shortages appear. There are just 54 active search dogs for the entire region. When the 2019 Mindanao earthquake struck, rescue teams worked around the clock. But even with national support, resources stretched thin within days. The same pattern would repeat in Metro Manila, only on a much larger scale. Despite annual drills and awareness campaigns, fewer than a third of households keep a full 72-hour emergency kit. The gap between what's planned on paper and what's possible in a real disaster remains wide, and time is running short to close it. Fatalities projections for a magnitude 7.2 earthquake on the West Valley fault land between 34,000 and 48,000 lives lost, with more than 100,000 injuries. These figures come from the Metro Manila Earthquake Impact Reduction Study, which uses building inventories, population density, and mapped ground shaking to estimate direct losses. Economic damage is pegged at 2.5 trillion pesos, roughly 12% of the country's GDP. That's not just collapsed buildings and ruined roads, it's jobs lost, businesses shuttered, and years of recovery work. The numbers are staggering, but they're not destiny. FIVOLCS and JICI plan to update these estimates in 2026, reflecting new data on urban growth and construction. Until then, the current projections serve as a baseline, a warning, not a sentence. What happens next depends on what people, communities, and governments do now. 5 steps stand out. First, every household should keep a 72-hour emergency kit: food, water, flashlight, whistle, and copies of documents. Second, everyone needs to know evacuation routes and safe zones, practicing them regularly. Third, buildings, especially older homes and workplaces, should be checked and, where possible, retrofitted to meet seismic standards. Fourth, participation in earthquake drills is vital. These aren't just for show, but practice for survival. Fifth, communities must organize, joining disaster response teams, sharing information, and supporting neighbors. Preparedness isn't a one-time effort. It's a habit. And while the risk can't be erased, it can be managed. The big one is a matter of time, but the difference between catastrophe and survival will come down to choices made long before the ground starts to shake. The West Valley Fault cuts through Metro Manila, home to 13 million people, and has not ruptured since 1658. Scientific models from the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology project, up to 48,000 deaths and 2.5 trillion pesos in losses if a magnitude 7.2 earthquake strikes. Critical hospitals, fire stations, and lifeline utilities sit directly on the fault, while over 200,000 buildings face possible collapse. Despite annual drills and monitoring, only a fraction of at-risk structures are retrofitted, and gaps remain in emergency readiness. The exact timing of the next major rupture is unknown. Geologists estimate a 400 to 600 year cycle, with the risk window peaking in the coming decades. Each new quake elsewhere reminds Metro Manila of its unfinished preparations. The evidence is clear. What happens next depends on the actions taken before the fault finally moves.